he's one of the best-known faces in India. He's certainly one of the most talked-about personalities, and without doubt, he's the most widely read author in the country. But do we really know him, or are we just prisoners of a reputation that precedes him each and every time? Let's see if today he lets us catch a glimpse of the man behind the image as we meet Khushwant Singh. I have to say, looking at all the things you've been, a lawyer, a diplomat, a scholar, an editor, an MP, a novelist, a gossip columnist, are you a man for all seasons, or are you a jack of all trades?
Well, you left out the dirty old man of Delhi. That's usually the way they describe me in most of the media. I have, like anyone else, varied interests, and I've expressed them myself in those different fields. I dabbled with politics, I've written about scandals, I've written about nature, I've written about women. Being an iconoclast, I also write about the joys of life, of drink and flirtation, all that. That's what's given me the bad image in this country.
Okay, let's try and see if I can catch a glimpse of the man behind all these different aspects of what you call the bad image. You were born in a village called Hadali,
Yeah.
a desert village in Pakistan,
Yeah.
to a family that traces its ancestry back to camel traders, I believe.
Well, not camel traders. This village was about 40 miles south of the Kura salt mines. And so my ancestors used to buy rock salt from the Kura salt mines, take them in camel caravans to cities in Punjab, mainly Amritsar and others, and get from there in return tea, sugar, oil, cooking oils and things like that, and come back in the camel caravans. So the childhood was largely in a Haveli, and outside were dozens of camels tethered. So one was brought up with camels and buffaloes and that kind of village atmosphere.
There's a story, I gather, that your grandfather, Khushwant Singh, was blessed by a Muslim peer, and that the family fortune and fame can be traced back to this incident.
Yeah, well, that's the legend, that there was a flood once, and the waters came down, swept down the Kevada salt range to our village, and this fellow had a little hermitage, and that was taken with the flood. He was on top of the thatch roof, and he was drawn towards our village, and he had nothing with him. He lost everything that was in his little dargah. And my grandfather looked after him, clothed him, fed him in the village and kept him there. And he blessed he said he had two sons, my grandfather, and one, he said, I'll give you the keys of Delhi to one, and I'll give the keys of the Punjab to the other. Now this is vast exaggeration. My father came to Delhi and became a builder and built a tidy fortune. My uncle joined politics and became a finance minister and then governor of Tamil Nadu. So to that extent, that prophecy was fulfilled.
And into this, if I may call it, rural idyll, you were born in 1915. But I gather no one remembers the exact date, and you had to make up your own birthday.
Yes, because, you know, in our villages, we didn't have this system of recording births and deaths, and in our families, nobody had horoscopes. So you vaguely remember. It's only when I came to Delhi, age of 5, and joined modern school, that I had to be at the giving end of all birthday parties. I didn't know such a thing. I was constantly having to take presents to other children's birthday parties, and I said it can't be one-way traffic, so I decided to have one of my own.
And what did you choose?
Well, it was the one that my father registered me. It was February 1915. And when the boys and girls came carrying little parcels, my grandmother was watching, and she said, what are all these boys and girls doing here? I said, I'm celebrating my birthday. She said, don't be silly. You were not born in winter, you were born in Bhadon. The summer months, the World War had been on for a year. And so I worked out, by her calculation, it turned out to be August 15th, because it was middle of Bhadon. And I was prophetic. I gave India its birthday too.
Without realizing that was going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, in those days, in fact, you used to attend the village school in Hadali, and I gathered from your own essay that you had to battle with pie dogs. What sort of school was it?
Well, you know, we went out from, and the pie dogs were waiting. My grandmother had leftovers of the meal the evening before, and she'd tear little bits of chapati and throw it to them. So they accompanied us right up to the school. It was a tiny school attached to the village Gurdwara, and all we were taught was the Gurmukhi alphabet and the morning
But you
prayer.
wrote on old-fashioned slates.
Oh yes, so wooden slates with a reed pen and dipped in ink made of soot, which we had in little mud ink bottles, and we went there and worked on it and came back, and then you had to wipe out all that and with what they call gachni mitti. It is a yellow kind of clay.
So it's really true to say that your childhood, in a sense, was another country.
Well, that's been a great asset because my roots are in the dung heaps of Punjab villages. I feel quite at home.
But in fact, you left, as you call them, the dung heaps and went abroad for many, many years.
No.
One of the more exciting jobs you did was with Krishna Menon, immediately after independence, and what for many consider the golden years of India's relationship with Britain.
Yeah.
What was that mercurial man like?
Very difficult, very edgy, witty, at other people's expense. He couldn't take any jokes at his own expense. He was a strange character, I think, and principle he believed that only stupid people tell the truth, that to be a clever man, you had to tell a lie. And he had always saying no to everything that you suggested, so I worked out a system, and I wanted something done. I put it in the negative, and he was sure to approve of it. So I got on very well with him for a long time.
So well, in fact, I gather that he once whisked you away because he said, Khushwant Singh, I don't like the clothes you wear.
That's right. I used to wear the usual, sweater and tie, and this was not done. He wanted a good Savile Row tailor. I thought he's giving me a gift. He just took me out one day from the office, had me measured, and I had to pay a hefty bill, a Savile Row tailor.
So he dressed you at your own expense.
That's right.
Okay, you became, if I can so put it, a household name for this country when really in 1969 you became the editor of the Illustrated Weekly. A lot has been written about your editorship, but as you look back on it, was it for you a very happy and productive time?
Well, it really established me as a journalist. I can say I'd started writing earlier for newspapers, and I think real break came in '65 when I was asked to do a lead article for the New York Times magazine section to explain the Indo-Pak War of 1965. And thereafter I didn't look back. Many articles appeared in the New York Times, and then I was offered the Illustrated Weekly job. It was such a wretched magazine. It was only found in dentists' waiting rooms, and all it had are pictures of people who got married or cocktail parties and tittle-tattle, that kind of thing.
You changed that in a big way, didn't you?
It was very simple. Since I'd been teaching in the States, I realized how little I knew of my own country. I got to know it because I had to teach India, comparative religions, Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam. And I said, if I don't know, my countrymen don't know either. So I had a three-pronged attack in the weekly: inform, amuse, provoke. And it worked as a formula.
Provoke was mainly the sex elements, wasn't it? The center
Well,
spreads, the dubious, double entendre.
Well, always did it very cleverly, because I'd have a tribal lass with nothing on her upper bare bosom, but instead of giving her measurements or something, I give factual account of where the tribe was found, how many there were, what they did. So I made people look at the picture and learn at the same time, and it worked very well.
But the funny thing is that, this image that one has of you, of a scotch-drinking, dirty story and dirty joke-telling womanizer, was actually a creation of that period. What people don't realize, that it was a creation of your own, and it's actually not the truth.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's both. I mean, we are a nation of sanctimonious humbugs. What we practice one thing and preach something quite different. And this riled me very much. And I said, I'll cock the snook at my entire society. If I drink, I'll drink right in the open and stand for drink as my birthright. If I like beautiful women, I'll say that they are beautiful on their faces, or write about them, describing them. And it immediately started upsetting people, and they said, we mustn't take this magazine. It's no longer a household magazine. This fellow's made it vulgar. But on the other hand, it started shooting up and double, treble, 4, 5 times the circulation. And it did, in fact, establish me as a journalist and a writer of light gossip.
And in fact, the truth behind that formula of success was that defy them and they'll bite.
That's right. Kick them in the ass and they'll respect you.
And you enjoyed the kicking too.
Yes, I did. I enjoy provoking my countrymen. They are really so smug, satisfied, and not curious about anything. And I think it's worth provoking them.
But the sad part is that those 10 glorious years ended very abruptly and very badly, didn't they?
Yeah, it's a very sad day for me because I'd run out. I'd had 2 or 3 extensions in my contract. I was due to retire. I accepted the retirement. My successor had been appointed. He worked with me for a few days. I had a week left in office, only 1 week. And I arrived one morning and I handed a note asking me to leave the office immediately. So I just picked up my umbrella and walked out. And I said, how discourteous can an employer be? And I think they regretted it later because the weekly came down and then ultimately died out.
The end of the Illustrated Weekly meant that you were then almost full-time a columnist and an author. I know you did a couple of spells more as editor, but increasingly your time was taken up with writing books. Has that then been the fulfillment of your dreams and your personality?
Well, I've done an enormous amount of writing, and as I don't hesitate saying, any rubbish I write gets published. So a whole lot.
And you sometimes don't hesitate to write the rubbish either.
That's right. Well, somebody said that you made, what did he call, bullshit into an art form. And I thought that was the correct description. This is the editor of the Times of India at that time. And he meant it very caustically, and I told him, I said, you try and turn bullshit into an art form. You see how hard it is to do it.
You wear the badge with pride.
That's right.
But tell me, the funny thing is that when you were poised to publish your first book, Train to Pakistan, the young lady who was typing up the manuscript for you finished her job and turned around and said, this book's a disaster, it's not going to sell.
I know. I was going to enter it for the Grove Press Award for the best work of fiction from India. And this was the American wife of a British diplomat. Her name was Tatty Bell. Very lovely woman. And she promised to type it out for me. I entered it into the Grove Press competition under an assumed name because one of the judges was Krishna Menon.
Oh, you wanted to ensure you didn't take
I didn't want to take that risk. And so it was entered under the name of a friend of mine called I. M. Verma. And Tatty said, she said, you're wasting your time. This is no good. And when it won the award, and the real name was disclosed that I was the author of the book, it was Tatty who came to me and said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
What a lovely story. We're going to have to take a small break there. I want to come back in part 2 and talk to you about the other reason why you became such a big household name in this country, your close friendship with the Gandhi family, and also ask you to reflect a little on what you think's happened to India since then. But first, a little commercial break. See you in a moment. Welcome back to Face to Face. My guest is Khushwant Singh. Alongside your editorship of the Illustrated Weekly, the other reason why people really got to know you was your close relationship with the Gandhi family. When did you first meet Indira Gandhi?
First I met her in Lahore. She came to my home. I was a practicing lawyer. She was a young girl there. I still have a photograph with me of her sitting in a corner. I gave it to her, one copy, years later.
Those were the days when she sat as a silent young girl who everyone ignored.
Yeah, well, she sat there. She had no words to say, and it reminded me of Lohiya's description of her as a gungi gudiya.
But later on, as you got to know her as Prime Minister, what was she like?
I quite liked her because for one, she was very easy on the eye. She was a very good-looking girl, and I once quoted lines of Hilaire Belloc for her, describing her. Her face was like the king's command when all the swords are drawn. You don't have to describe her looks, but there was something imperious about her, dignified. And she was very particular about the way she looked. She dressed very well. And she had a kind of dignity that I haven't seen in other people. That's at a distance.
She fell terribly from grace during the emergency. What went wrong? Was it a fault in her character?
I think it was mainly because she was embarrassed by what was being said about Sanjay, her son, dealings, his Maruti car project, and she's being attacked in Parliament all the time and rapidly losing ground. And I think at one time in that judgment of the Allahabad High Court, which deprived of her vote in Parliament, it was a silly kind of judgment. And instead of fighting it out, she succumbed to the temptation of her advisors, people like Siddharth Shankar Ray and her own son Sanjay, to declare an emergency and lock up all the opposition parties.
Sanjay was really her weakness.
Sanjay was a bit of a bully. He was a very lovable boy, but he was a very dominant character. I think she was quite scared of the fellow. It was her son, but he really ruled the place. He was polite and courteous to her, but she couldn't cross his path.
You used to admire him. You often wrote admiringly of him. What was he like in his relationship with you?
I liked him. I admit, and he's a bit of a a bit of a gunda, bit of a do-gooder. There's a combination. He was an impatient man. He knew he'd never get elected, but he wanted to run the country. And that's what he proceeded to do in the emergency. He was the ruler of this country during the emergency and later when they came back to power for the short time before he...
What about him appealed to you? Was it his strength of character, his determination, or was it the gunda that you liked in a sort of...
Well, he was a lovable gunda. He was extremely polite and courteous to me and almost treated me like an uncle. He often turned to me for advice. And I was all for his zeal for family planning, even for compulsory family planning, for cleaning slums, and you can't do them gently. You have to use bulldozers.
But he also was, people said, a nefarious character. He was a toughie who broke rules to get his way. Were you, in a sense, bewitched by power?
I'm not sure. I have not analyzed. I was with him at one of these situations where he was summoned by the Shah Commission, and I went with him, and it was really an experience I can't forget. I walked behind him and Menaka Gandhi into the court, which is already, it was crowded with hostile factions, and as soon as he entered, they went for him, physically. And he fought back, he was powerful. And he had his own gundas with him, so there was a free-for-all in the courtroom, and I sought shelter behind Kiran Bedi, the police. She said, Sardar Sahab, you come and stand behind me, and while they were going at each other with tables and chairs and everything. And ultimately, he won the day. His gundas, that's better the rival faction.
You got to know the family very closely at that period, and in a sense you had a ringside view over the quarrel between Indira Gandhi and Menaka Gandhi.
Yeah.
What went wrong and who was to blame?
Well, I think the chemistry was wrong. Right from the day Menaka entered the household, I think Mrs. Gandhi didn't like her. She thought her son had married below their types, which is really quite wrong, because she came from a very respected family of landowners and cattle breeders. Her grandfather was knighted by the British. So I think there Mrs. Gandhi was wrong, but she could never find anything right with him. And Menaka often complained to me about her belittling her all the time in front of Sonia. I remember once after Sanjay was killed in the air accident, she told me of a party she had for Mrs. Thatcher, lunch party, where Rajiv and Sonia were sat on the main table and she was sat with the staff, with R.K. Dhawan and others.
So a lot of the fault for that breakup of relationship lies with Mrs. Gandhi in your eyes?
She was really behaved like a village mother-in-law. Amongst other things, she'd bring things like Pandit Nehru's pen or watch, and in front of Menaka tell Sonia, Sonia, I'd rather you had these things of my father's as mementos, leaving Menaka out. And these were hurtful things to do, and she was constantly doing them.
Your son has gone on record to say that, and he said this with particular reference to your relationship with the Gandhis, that my father's politics is run by the heart, not the head. His reactions are emotional, not rational. He's a fool when it comes to politics.
Yeah, I've noticed. He said that. He had the liberty of saying that. Why I supported Sanjay, I've told you. If I were in a position of power, I'd make family planning compulsory in this country. I'd remove slums by force, and I'd make the country green by forcing everyone to plant trees everywhere and stop the cremation of the dead by wood. I feel very strongly in these things, but I'm not in a position of power to enforce them.
But Sanjay took up some of those.
Sanjay took up. I think one thing he agreed to do was to plant a forest in Delhi in my father's memory. We were going to finance. And fortunately for me, even after he died, Menaka carried out the wish. We laid the foundation, she laid the foundation stone, and there are about 10,000 trees there now.
Let's turn briefly to yourself. You've revealed something of yourself in your explanation of why you were close to Sanjay in particular. You write that I'm not a nice man to know. People think you're one of the nicest people in the country to know. I mean, are you being unduly modest? Are you being harsh?
It worked. I've made you say that to me instead of my saying it.
So the description of yourself is full of guile, is it?
Well, yes, but also I do things which other people don't do. For instance, when I write obituaries, if the person was a nasty man, if he was corrupt, I say so. And the fact that he's died doesn't make him into a saint in my eyes. And so people go for me, say, this fellow doesn't even spare the dead. So why should I spare the dead? If the fellow was corrupt in life, well, he remains corrupt. His memory should be fully recorded as a man who rose out of corruption.
When you meet your maker, as all of us must one day, and he looks upon you and he says, Khushwant Singh, account for your time on earth, what will you say to him?
Well, you know, I'm a non-believer, so I don't think there is a maker. I don't think there's a rebirth. There is no day of judgment, no heaven or hell. But I know that death is inevitable, and let me end by quoting my favorite lines, summing up I think they are by Walter Savage Landor. I strove with none, for none was worth my strife. Nature I loved, and next to nature art. I warmed my hands before the fire of life. It sinks, and I am ready to depart. Death is a full stop.
But looking back on your life, has it been a happy, content, fulfilled one, or are there still things you want to achieve?
Oh, I would have liked to have written the definitive novel in India. I haven't done it. I have no time left to do it. But when I feel depressed that I wasted a life, I open up this long, 2-yard long scroll which I got from the Library of Congress at Washington, listing the number of books I'd written, books, tracts, pamphlets. It runs it to over 85 now.
So when you're depressed, you look at your own achievements and you say, it's been worth it.
That's right.
Khushwant Singh, for this wonderful interview, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.